Hello and welcome to this series of introductory videos from Zero Carbon Dorset. In the next 10 minutes or so, I'm going to attempt to set out the scientific background as to why we should take the action on the climate and ecological crisis that we're proposing. What Zero Carbon Dorset is and what it aims to achieve is covered in separate videos. In fact, you can discover much more about our work and other related stories via the links that are shared at the end of this recording. So what is the climate and ecological crisis? Well, let's start this story thousands of miles away from Dorset at the Mauna Loa Observatory on Big Island, Hawaii, nearly 3,400 meters above sea level. Scientists have been continuously monitoring and collecting data here relating to atmospheric change since the 1950s, when CO2 was around 315 parts per million. As I'm recording this in the middle of 2022, it's at 421 parts per million, an increase of a third in a little over half a century. But we're talking parts per million. Should that really concern us? Well, the next few slides from the Climate Reality Project help to explain why climate scientists are particularly concerned by what seems like a relatively small amount. This chart shows how CO2 concentration has changed over the past 800,000 years. And this is taken from actual readings of ice cores drilled down, which can be analysed to see what the concentration was in the air bubbles over all of that time. And as you can see from this blue line, concentrations have ranged between 180 and 280 parts per million over nearly a million years. And what those same ice cores can tell us is what the average temperature was at the time. And as you can see, there's an almost direct correlation between CO2 concentration and average global temperature. In fact, if we look at this little red circle here, that indicates where we are now. The last few thousand years in which human society has evolved, and the last circle at the bottom of that line takes us to the last ice age. But the issue is, as we've said, we're already over 420 parts per million, already at 413 at the turn of this decade, and the scientists tell us that if we carry on the way we're going, then with another few decades, we could be around 600 parts per million. And it's relatively easy to understand that if the higher red circle represents where we are now, and the lower red circle represents the last ice age, it doesn't take much to work out just how much heat energy that additional CO2 concentration is putting into our atmosphere. So where are all these greenhouse gases coming from? Well, this illustration provides an indication of where the majority are. Of course, the largest of which is the burning of fossil fuels. But we also need to recognize that our consumer society, where we're bombarded with reasons to buy things we don't really need, with money we often don't have, to impress people we often don't like, is really supercharging this process. And that link with the growth of the consumer society and globalization could be seen in this chart, which tracks annual CO2 emissions from around the beginning of the Industrial Revolution up to the present day. And you can see that this started to take off in the middle of the 1800s, but really since the 1950s has grown exponentially. You may notice there's a small dip at the end, which is actually the impact of the global pandemic. But sadly, in 2021, emissions grew by 6% again, taking them up to those record limits. We're already seeing the impact of this, stronger storms, hurricanes, cyclones, as they travel across warmer oceans. They are effectively fueled, and we're seeing bigger downpours because a warmer atmosphere can hold more moisture. In fact, every 1 degree centigrade increase means that the atmosphere can hold 7% more water, and the same heat that's creating those issues is leading to longer and deeper droughts. and creating the situation where there are more wildfires. The wildfire season is longer with drier winters, it starts earlier, carries on later, and the wildfires themselves tend to be more intense. And the loss of ice is leading to rising sea levels around the globe. In fact, already in places like Miami, they experience now what they call sunny day flooding, where simply the highest levels of the tides mean that many areas of the city are inundated with water. All of these issues are leading to issues with food supply, and the increase in temperatures also reduces the yields of many of the key crops supplying food to people around the globe. And the climate crisis is a health crisis, not only in terms of the consequences from the events we've just covered, but the same pollution that is increasing global temperatures also leads to poor air quality, already responsible globally for millions of deaths every year. Aligned with the climate crisis, and partly due to it, but also partly due to our demands for more land, for agriculture, for expanding cities and other areas, we're witnessing a biodiversity crisis. In fact, we now risk losing up to 50% of all land-based species in this century. And while we've seen dramatic improvements in prosperity in many parts of the world over the past half century, let's be clear, the current system isn't delivering for everyone. And in fact, in many places, many quality of life indicators are now in reverse. So this has led to many reports coming out from the United Nations, and the current Secretary General, Antonio Guterres, has been issuing a number of warnings recently following the last IPCC report. He said the jury has reached a verdict and it's damning. The report of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change is a litany of broken climate promises. It is a file of shame that puts us firmly on track towards an unlivable world. We're on a pathway to global warming of more than double the 1.5 degrees centigrade limit agreed in Paris. Let's remember that limit agreed by all the nations of the world, because it represents the level beyond which we are uncertain about tipping points and how quickly we could experience even more catastrophic climate change. But he's saying that some government and business leaders are saying one thing but doing another. Simply put, they are lying, and the results will be catastrophic. This is a climate emergency. So to finish, I'm going to look back at the concept of zero carbon and have a look at this chart from the IPCC. This chart is quite busy, but what the core details show you is 4 pathways, P1 to P4, that they have indicated we might choose to follow to take us to a situation where we stay within that 1.5 degree limit. Now, the red line indicates 2050, which is the globally accepted target date of net zero, the date enshrined in UK law. The problem is, and it's not often discussed, is this leaves us with a legacy for the next generation of having to suck carbon out of the atmosphere, potentially at up to half the rate we are emitting it now. And it's really difficult to know how we could achieve anything on that scale with our understanding about the ability to rewild, reforest, and with a lack of any technology that could deliver that at scale. This is why many climate scientists say wealthier nations in particular should be aiming for the green line of zero by 2030. And all agree the point at which we must start to reduce emissions dramatically is now. We need to be coming down from that dotted green line if we have to have more of a chance than 50% of staying within the 1.5 degree goal set by the Paris Agreement, beyond which we face the unlivable world referred to by Antonio Guterres. In broad terms, we need to reduce emissions at twice the rate we did in the pandemic, starting now, and continue that reduction every year until we get to zero, and follow up with a programme of negative emissions for as long as it takes to get the Earth's systems back into balance. This is why it's an emergency. Now, this is clearly a global issue, and most of its effects will be felt first and worst by those least responsible and most vulnerable. We're not immune in Dorset, however, and in our Dorset 2030 report, you'll find details on many issues, including how our land has degraded over the past few decades and the scale of the threat posed to many of our coastal communities by sea level rises. Thank you for taking time to watch this video. I hope it's helped put some of the issues into perspective. Thank you for watching.